Hey, welcome in everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight on Dom Time. And it's at night where we have our weekly roundup. We invite in some of the area's best pundits and a whole array of them and talk about everything that's out there in the news. Some of it could be lifestyle. Some of it could be serious. It's hard to tell with some of the stuff, like the Michael Douglas announcement that he may have contracted throat or oral cancer through oral sex. Where do you put that, in tabloid or serious coverage or somewhere where the two come together? Joining me tonight to break down all the events that have happened since last week's weekly roundup is Daniel Denver. Daniel is a reporter at the Philadelphia City paper, and he also is a contributor to the Salon, the Guardian, and the New Republic. Dan, thanks for joining us tonight, your maiden voyage here.
Thanks for having me, Dom. I appreciate it.
Now, you write about, as I understand it too, a lot of issues of inequality, trying to connect the dots. It's sort of your beat at the Philadelphia City paper. So when I wrote in the Daily News recently, one of the stories we'll talk about tonight, it's out there is this ongoing funding battle. Philadelphia public schools need about $60 million that they want from the city, $120 million from the state. And Governor Corbett has been dragging his feet, I think rightfully so. You may differ on this. And I wrote a piece saying, do people really believe that Corbett wants people to go to prison versus going to the Philadelphia public schools that are well funded?
Yeah, I mean, just today, a march arrived in Harrisburg of people protesting Corbett's budget and opposing his spending on prisons and insufficient funding of education. And I don't think it's so much an argument that there's a conspiracy that Corbett gets some sort of pleasure by sending people to prison. But I think the argument is more that a budget is a reflection of a society's or a government's priorities, and that it's unfortunate that we're willing to spend so much money on the back end, locking people up from the same communities that we're not willing to invest in education and housing and feeding on the front end.
Here's what I would challenge, though. Who's making people go to prison, though? I mean, people have a right to go to school. You've seen it, and I've seen it. Isn't it a parenting issue? If kids show up, don't want to do their work in school, or absent, there's a million problems. Is it we're not spending enough? Is that what's driving them toward prison?
Well, I think if you look at the research on the countries that have the best performing schools, they really do invest more than we do in education, in teaching. There's a lot of talk in the U.S. right now about getting rid of bad teachers, but we really have a harder time holding on to the best teachers who leave after a few years.
Would you favor merit pay then?
No, I think when you look at Finland and other high performing school systems, what you see is teachers being an extremely well paid, highly valued profession, and so you have the top quarter of university classes there fighting to get in. So it's not about then getting rid of those.
See, I know the Finnish model too for viewers, but is Finland like us, or again, do they have more motivated students going there too? Versus, I mean, to say that maybe people are not getting a world-class education, but to end up going to prison. That's where I think the breakdown that I see. Philadelphia public schools, to me, and you follow them maybe more closely, are dysfunctional. They've had all kinds of huge problems. So people are looking across the rest of the state and saying, why give these guys more money?
Well, I think a baseline, foundational point that needs to be just driven home every time is that, number one, the School Reform Commission, which controls Philadelphia schools, is state controlled, and Philadelphia schools have been under state control for a decade.
Right.
The state takeover in 2002 was, we're going to take over, and in exchange, we're going to make sure you're adequately funded. So the state's been in control for a decade, and they've failed to get the job done.
But the leadership, in my view, are all these Philadelphia hacks that are put in there. Maybe that's the problem. They're put in by the state, some of them, but there's various people that put in these people, and they're just not good.
Well, at the time though, they're cheered by people in Harrisburg. Afterwards, then they're Philadelphia hacks. But at the time, when they're what's happened to poor districts in this country is instead of giving them the funding they need to succeed, we've turned them into these sort of laboratories for novel education reforms. High stakes testing. Pushing back on teachers' unions, expanding charter schools, and then those experiments fail. And instead of just going back to the basic things that the school needs, we embark on yet more experimentation. I think that's been a problem.
Okay. All righty. We'll settle that one on a future show, but a lot of other things in the news too. Michael Douglas out there, and you may not cover this, but I did on my radio show, and I find the Michael Douglas thing to be this nexus of tabloid stuff, but also a health issue. And he said on Monday to The Guardian, a paper that you've written for, that no, he doesn't regret a life of smoking, drinking, and God knows what else, because he got his cancer through oral sex. Well, when we talked about this, you could hear a pin drop. I mean, think of the consequences of this, that oral sex, males apparently to females, I think that's what we're talking about here, at least with Douglas, is unsafe in his view. That seemed to be where he was going.
I mean, just speaking, less as a reporter because I haven't covered this issue, and more just as an individual. I think that's terrifying for a lot of people who think they're, practicing safe sex out there.
Exactly.
But only for vaginal or that sort of intercourse. But I think in the United States we've made some great progress on HIV infections and other issues, but there's still not the level of commitment we need to actually control these public health crises. And I think HPV is this relatively new one bubbling up that your average person in the street just doesn't know very much about.
Yeah, well, I would say that the numbers are very small.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's around 5,000 men a year. Now, if you get it, well, of course it's not small. But we don't know how Michael Douglas got it. See, I'm suspect of these guys and the type of stuff that you put it out there. Now, Angelina Jolie didn't think that was as tabloid. I mean, double mastectomy, 87% chance of getting cancer versus 5 now. I think that's a pretty good story out of Hollywood of somebody responsible using their celebrity to do something. This guy,
and so why is he
I
putting
think, is
this
getting
forward?
divorced. And that's his rationale. And you can imagine if you're Catherine Zeta-Jones, you're seen as what, radioactive now?
So he's sort of
throwing
throwing her under the bus.
Yeah, exactly, under the STD bus.
Yeah, well, and that is quite a bus because people with STDs, even though it's a public health issue, because they come from sexual activity, they're stigmatized in our society, which is not
not
great
so
for
Catherine Zeta-Jones is kind of out at, I guess.
Yeah.
We're not sure at this point who the partner is, but I assume that's what he's saying.
Well, or else he's implying some other stuff about the relationship as well.
Exactly
which is
right.
Also not entirely flattering.
All right, coming up more with Dan Denver here. We'll take you through all the issues that have happened since our last weekly roundup as Dom Time continues.